Now, with Valve dropping the biggest update of CS2 so far, we've seen a lot of market interactions, specifically on the positive end. However, there's one area that's really been struggling. That's going to be the active duty cases, specifically the 4 that remained inside of the active drop pool have not really seen any growth, but rather a pretty significant decrease for a lot of them all across the board. Now, this brings up the question, should you be buying potentially into these? Obviously, we know there's a lot of profit potential with investing into cases at a super cheap price point. However, I want to focus in specifically on what's been going on with the Snakebite case. That's because the Snakebite case has not seen some miraculous performance like a lot of people were expecting. I called it out in my past video, but the thing is, the Snakebite case has such a massive supply that it's going to take a significant amount of time to develop, especially because it was losing some of its market share beforehand. Therefore, it's not going to be a perfect investment, and therefore, when we're talking about these other active duty cases, I don't personally think you need to go into them right now. I think you're going to be better off holding off your money or potentially putting it into a different area.
SkinSwap is today's sponsor, and they're also sponsoring you with a free bonus for signing up with the first link in the description. They're the premier place for CSGO and Rust skins with a massive trading site and a top-of-the-line marketplace, offering you the most competitive rates out there and a massive 40% bonus when you're using that link in the description. Combine that with their top-of-the-line selling feature with many payout options and their trading feature legitimately taking you just about a minute, and there's no reason not to sign up with that first link in the description.
Now, talking about the Copenhagen Major, we have a lot to go over. Obviously, we're about a month away from the actual major starting. However, we've got a lot to discuss. First up here, we're starting the RMRs off in just a couple days, 2 days actually, after this video releases. We're going to be starting with Europe RMR A, and that's very important to see how these ones develop, because obviously we know there's a lot of stickers out there right now that currently don't have alternatives that might get alternatives at the Copenhagen Major, and this obviously leads to a very detrimental impact to that original sticker because it's going to be losing a significant amount of demand and potentially some of the price along with it too. This is going to be teams like Cloud9, Imperial, and a lot of other big name teams that do have the potential here. We've got some like 3D Max, which are a little on the edge, but there's a lot of potential chances for a lot of teams to go ahead and get another borderless sticker if that's exactly what happens with Copenhagen. Now, specifically talking about Copenhagen, we know there is a very strong potential. We could be seeing a lot of new content here. That's because we obviously know we're not seeing the legends, the contenders, and the challengers, but rather 3 different stages, and therefore that opens up the opportunity for other things to change. Specifically, if we want to go back to the update Valve just released, we can see that specifically they went ahead and added foils back into the capsule, and they made the glitters and the hollows the same tier at the purple tier. This is extremely important because that means your odds of a hollow in Paris were about 3.2%. Here for Copenhagen, if this is the same exact format we see, your odds for a hollow are going to be 8%. That's 2.5 times bigger. That's going to be a massive problem for the amount of supply that these capsules have. We know the hollows are going to be overinvested then potentially. There's so many issues that come along with this because obviously in the current format right now, we've seen issues of overinvestment already, and it's going to be 2.5 times worse. Now that we talked about the negative aspects, there's actually a really big amount of positive aspects that have specifically come from this update. First of all, if we want to talk about Paris, obviously the Paris capsules have seen a little bit of a rebound because of this, because there's just increased demand for stickers in the short term here. However, I want to focus in specifically on the stickers. That's because the stickers have seen a huge increase in demand currently, because obviously people can now apply them anywhere, and Paris is the most liquid sticker out there. It's the most liquid sticker in the game, and therefore people are going to be applying Paris more often than any other sticker. This is extremely important because now the cheap price point that it has been boosted up a little bit, specifically because you can stack glitters and hollows, and people overall are just having a lot more interest in crafting right now, and Paris is going to directly benefit because of this. Now, obviously we know the massive supply of Paris is not going to be depleted overnight, but this is extremely crucial when we're talking about an investment like Paris that people in the short term are really unsure of exactly where it's going to go. We know long term it's going to be a great investment in my personal opinion. It just needs time to develop like everything else, but this is a very good short-term development for a lot of investors around the scene. Now, one area I want to touch on again is going to be the future of the Snakebite case. Obviously, when we're talking about the Snakebite case, we know long term it's going to be a good investment. It's in the rare pool right now, and even though the demand was definitely dropping off for the Snakebite case, it only makes up 1% of the drop pool. And you combine that with the fact that even though it was the least unboxed active duty cases make up 50% of the total amount of cases unboxed. There was over 1 million Snakebites unboxed in the past month, and obviously it's going to succeed over a longer period of time. However, in the short term here, I think it's definitely going to be a very struggling cause. We can look at nearly any case that comes out of the active duty pool in the recent times, and we can see that they struggle so much because the supply on these cases is just so absolutely massive. You cannot even fathom how many of these cases are out there picked up by investors at 3, 5, 7 cents. There is so many of these cases, and obviously they're not going to be all selling at once, but it's going to be a very tough time for the Snakebite case to go ahead and see some massive growth. And if you think that it's going to see some massive growth, I would refer you to the clutch case 10 times over. Now, talking about rare cases, we actually have some pretty interesting developments. First up, if we want to look at the 1-day graph, we have unboxed 1 million cases in the past 24 hours, which is extremely important because if we want to look at the past month, we have not cracked that number over about 600 to 700,000 on average. We can see that in the past month, we have about 20 million cases unboxed, and that's actually been pretty consistent throughout January and December and a lot of the lower interest months inside of 2023. This is extremely important because when we're talking about the rare cases, we would expect to see an uptick in the price for a decent amount of them, not necessarily today or tomorrow, but in the near future, and that's exactly what we're potentially starting to see. The one I want to focus in on is specifically the Danger Zone case. Danger Zone case is on a little bit of a hype spree right now. That's because if we want to look look at the buff graph for this thing, it's up almost 30% in the past week. It went from about a 60-cent price point down to 45 cents and then back up to 60-ish cents. It's a really interesting graph, and we can see at the unboxing numbers, it's actually starting to dominate here as well. It's coming in as the third most unboxed case, when obviously we can see the Clutch and the Snakebite are obviously much cheaper, much more well known, and much more accessible to a lot of people. Overall, the rare case market, in my opinion, is doing phenomenal right now. We know long term these cases are all great investments, but in the short term, people start to get a little bit pessimistic, and I think this is exactly what we needed right now to know we're in a very good position. Now, Chinese New Year is officially here, and if you listen to me, you're going to be in a very good position. That's because if we want to look at the Tai Lu stickers, I told you these are a bad investment. They're actually not that related to the Chinese New Year overall, and they just get a little bit too overhyped, especially inside this area. I've had people contacting me for months trying to get me to hype them up, and we can see exactly what's going on right here. They are down potentially 25 to 30% in the past month, and we would zoom out to 6 months, they're looking at potentially a 6-month low in price. These things are an okay long-term investment if that's really what you want to do, but I would not suggest it in the slightest, especially when we're talking about Chinese New Year here. I think the impact was significantly overblown, but when we're talking about Chinese New Year overall, this could be potentially why we're starting to see a little bit of an increase in the rare case unboxings or case unboxings as a whole. However, when we're talking about something like this, the impact is a little bit more on the community's perception of what's going to happen rather than what actually happens inside of China. China is always going to be a little bit of an unknown, especially inside of this area. Now, talking about the Chinese economy, it's actually not been going too well for them. If you don't know China, they've got two main options for investing. They can go into the Chinese stock market or they can go into housing, and both of those have actually been doing really poorly. Specifically, the stock market was the only good option left for a lot of people, and that's actually gone down significantly in the past month, which could potentially lead people to go ahead and start looking at alternative investments, which obviously CS2 is definitely a part of that area. Now, talking about future updates, obviously we just received a major update, so there's probably not going to be anything too crazy until we see Copenhagen. Now, Copenhagen is only 34 days away from actually starting, and when we look at this right here, we can see that we're probably going to end up getting the stickers a decent time ahead of it. That could be as long as 24 days or as short as just a couple. I will honestly say though, I think we're probably going to receive another major update right after the major finishes. That's because of a couple different things that go along with it, but basically Valve is trying to retain as many players as they can right now. If we want to look at the player counts, we're not struggling necessarily, but we could be doing significantly better than we are in the current moment, and I think Valve fully realizes it. That's why they went completely ghost and they worked on this major update right here. And when we're talking about that for the impacts that it's going to have for investing, it's only positive for honestly the near future in my personal opinion. Now, what specifically should you be doing right now? Well, in my honest opinion, I think if you're going to look at investments, there's a couple big areas you should look at. If you want to pick up Paris right now, it's definitely a possibility, although it wouldn't be my strongest recommendation. I also wouldn't be recommending very strongly to go for the Snakebite case. I think there's a lot better options than what the current Snakebite case offers. Instead, I would definitely implore you to go ahead and look at some of these rare cases. Rare case market is extremely undervalued in my current opinion. Even though the ROIs aren't absolutely stellar, I think there's definitely so much potential inside of this area, especially when the player count picks up and we're starting to see a lot of the big names come back into the CS investing scene. But that's all I got. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Go with your today.